Welcome to episode 10 of the Seedling Stitch knitting podcast. I'm your host Athena, and this will be your special co-host of this episode, Charlotte the Fox. And in this episode, we will be talking all about the making of Charlotte and her little wardrobe. She's sitting here now while I introduce myself. I am a knitter based in Vancouver, Canada. I'm also a knitting teacher at my local yarn store, as well as I'm doing some designing. When I'm not knitting, I'm trying to finish my PhD in engineering, hopefully by the end of this year. This channel is my little creative outlet where I talk all about my knitting projects and maybe sharing some tips and tricks with you. And also I like to share some of my thought process when I'm doing some designing and some modifications in knitwears. If you are new, welcome. And by the way, at the beginning of the episode, that piano is played by me on my antique piano, and you can listen to the full song at the end of each episode. If you're a returning subscriber, welcome back, and thank you for sticking with me for so long. It's still kind of hard for me to believe that I am in episode 10 already. I started this channel back in mid-March, and now it's July. It's only been 4 months, and I still remember in the first episode I said maybe I'll be able to do this once per month, but look at me now. I'm doing these episodes every other week because I feel if I don't, I will accumulate too many knitting projects and too many thoughts in knitting that I want to share with you, so I'd better do it every other week so that I won't make like 2-hour long videos each time. So for this episode, I have one finished object, we can't call it an object, we should call it one finished animal, one finished creature. And I have a couple of other whips to share with you. So without further ado, let's grab some knitting or some drink and get started. Let's start with what I'm wearing. Unfortunately, I don't have any new knitwear to show you because I only started knitting from last September. It has been less a year since I've been knitting, so I don't have a lot of knitwear to wear at this point, especially for the summer. But I try to choose one that fits into the theme of today's episode because there are a lot of animals, and these animals are coming from one of my favorite video games, the Animal Crossing New Horizon game. You might have seen me designing some of my like fire owl design using this game because there is like a pixel art thingy in this game, and this game is all about like a lot of cute creatures, cute animals here, and you are living in a small island in a very chill environment. You plant trees and you catch fishes and you tender your garden and you chat with all these cute animal friends, which fits very well with the theme of this episode, which will also be some animal friends. And this is just a random t-shirt from Nicole, and they have like a collaboration with Animal Crossing, so they can put Animal Crossing motifs in this t-shirt, and I think it's cute. It's actually for children, but I bought it for myself. So let's start talking about Charlotte the Fox. Charlotte the Fox is a design from this book, Knitted Animal Friends by Louise Crowther, and this book features, I think, 12 different animals like mouse or dogs, and I have already made 2 animals. I have my Tilly the hare, and I have this is a sloth. In the book there is an owl, but I made that into a sloth. And in this book, all the animals, they have these super long legs, and they are all of the same size, and there are a lot of outfits, and you can and all these outfits can fit each of the animals. I started out making these animal dolls back in late last year when I first started learning to knit, and you can see me talking about the making of Tilly the hare and the sloth back in my episode 1. And I have been busy with other knitwears since that, and only lately I'm making the third animal, Charlotte, because this is a gift to one of my best friends from middle school, and she's getting married in the end of this year, so this would be a marriage gift for her. There are a few different parts for the making of Charlotte, and I'm going to break that down one by one. So for Charlotte, I first make the body of the fox, and then the dress was already made some point in the last year when I first started knitting, and then I made this little messenger bag for her, and then this outfit. So I'm going to strip Charlotte and show you how I made the body of her. Okay, so this is Charlotte being naked, which is also very cute. It's just a little fox, right? And she's not shy showing her white belly. So in this book, all the animals are knitted in the flat for the different parts and then sewed together. So I started by knitting all these pieces, the 2 legs and the body, the tail, the arms, the head, and then the 2 ears. All these are knitted in the flat in little pieces and then seamed together using the mattress stitches. I'm not sure if you can see, but along these lines are my seam line. If you're doing the mattress stitch and then you pull the cord tight every couple stitches, then your seam line will be invisible, and the seam line for the body is here, seam line for the head is here, seam line for the ear is there. And while you are seaming them, you will be putting the stuffing into the body so that you have like a soft, squishy animal. And for Charlotte, I used 2 kinds of stuffing. I used to collect some yarn tips. I still have a few left just so that I'll be able to show you what I stuff into Charlotte. I just put this jar by my armchair, and whenever I'm doing knitting and have to cut the yarn, I just throw these yarn tips into this jar. So I've collected some. But actually I had like 2 jars of these yarn tips, but it only filled in this little bit for Charlotte, and the majority of the stuffing comes from an IKEA pillow. I'll show you. This is like a $5 IKEA pillow with polyester fillings. This is like the cheapest IKEA pillow you could get, and you get a huge amount of polyester filling. You can see that I stuffed my sloth and the Tilly the hare both in with the polyester, and then Charlotte again. So 3 animals, and I still have this much of the IKEA pillow left, and you can see I just like cut a hole in the pillow, and I can show you what the filling looks like. So these are what you have. I think you can buy those like professional toy polyester filling, but I don't think there's much of a difference than these, and this is really cheap. So if you are looking into like making some animal dolls, you can buy these IKEA pillow for a cheap substitution for the toy fillings. And the polyester filling is like this, and when I'm stuffing, like when I'm doing the mattress stitch, let's say along the leg, and every a couple stitches I'll like get this much of the filling and then wrap them into a ball, fill that in, and then push more of these stuffings in. And if there's like lumps, sometimes there are lumps that get into them. Then I'll just use my tapestry needle to stir them so that the filling is uniform. That's what I do. And I still have a huge amount of filling, and I can make a lot more animal friends if I want. And when I'm done, I just close the pillow like this with a elastic band. Yeah. Also, basically you stuff each of these parts separately. Like you make the body, you stuff the arms, and then you stuff the tails, you stuff the head, and after that you will sew these little parts together. I think I first sewed the ear into the head, and then sewed the head into the body, sewed the leg into the body, sewed the arm into the body, and then sewed the tails. There's really no particular order you have to follow as long as you put them together. And one of the hard part was to make all these parts symmetric. For the leg, it was easier because when in the pattern instruction, when you knit the body, you use some purl bumps to mark the position of the legs. So you will just sew the leg around those purl bumps. But for the arm and the head, there isn't really any like mark. So I sort of have to eyeball it so that when I'm putting these two arms, they have to be at the matching position. And also when I'm sewing these parts, I always like measure with the clothings to see if these arms can come out of these armholes, and if the head can fit well with the neck hole of these clothings. And also the tail, I have to make sure that the tail is above like the lowest opening of this dress, so that when Charlotte wears the clothing, her tail can go from the holes of the back of the holes from the back of the dresses, and her arm can fit the armholes properly. I also made the facial expression a little bit differently than the book. I will show you the Charlotte Fox from the book, and this is my Charlotte. I added a little mouth because I think that will make her kind of be smiling and then be more friendly. And also I changed the eye location. I think I made the eye location a little bit lower and a little bit further away, just so that like she looks cuter, like more like a baby. For this little dress, I knitted this dress a long while ago, maybe last year in October or November, I don't remember exactly. And this is knitted, this is a raglan construction where you start from the neck and then you add stitches along these between the arm and the front, and between the back and the arm. So there are like 1, 2, 3, 4 raglan lines. I think a lot of clothing, almost all of the clothings from this book are done with the raglan construction, where you add stitches along 4 of these lines, and until you added enough lines to about here, and you separate these stitches to knit for the sleeves, or not. If it is just a short sleeve, then you don't need to knit the sleeves, and then you knit the body. And because there is a button band, so this point is knitted in the flat until you join in the round from here, and you knit in the round. And the hem is a folded hem with picot edge. I first learned how to do this picot edge from this design. So basically you knit, and then at this point you knit 2 together, yarn over, knit 2 together, yarn over, so that you can make a hole. And then you keep knitting a few more rounds, and then you fold that together so that the hole will form this picot edge. And then there's also some lacy patterns in the front panel, but it's not very visible because of the yarn. This yarn is Host Yarn Super Soft, a very rustic yarn, so the pattern doesn't show very well. But it's a cute little dress for Charlotte, isn't it? In this book, all the animals have super long legs, and I found that somehow Charlotte has longer legs than all the other animals. This is my tilly hair, and I actually counted the rows, and I found that I knitted Charlotte correctly, and I knitted like 10 rows fewer than instructed for the rabbit as well as for the sloth. So I don't know how I did that, but this is super long. I think if I am to make any animal from the book, I would reduce, I think, 20 rows for these animals, because these legs are just like too long. And if it's shorter, then like this, perhaps will be cuter. So I finished making the body in last weekend. I had to say, before the sewing, I had so much fear of the sewing because I had a lot of painful memory for making the rabbit and the sloth, and back then I remembered it took me really a long time to sew them up, so I kind of really feared the sewing for Charlotte. But it took me only the weekend for sewing Charlotte together, and my skill for doing all the matrices stitch had improved so much since I made the rabbit. It's been like a few months since I made the other animals, so I'm quite relieved that all those matrice stitches aren't that scary anymore for me. I also spent some extra time in finding the perfect location for these eyes. It took me 2 trials to sew the eye at the optimal position, and I like this version better. Before, I think I sewed the eyes too close, because when you are sewing the eyes, you are pulling the threads a little bit hard so that the eyes can be a little bit dented. So after that, initially I was planning on just knitting this bag for Charlotte, but because I was so much encouraged by the making of Charlotte's body, I decided to make all her outfits as well. That means I decided to knit that linen stitch coat. So let's talk about this bag first. This little bag is knitted in the flat first. It's a functioning bag, like there is a button and you can open it and you can put some letter inside. Yeah, I plan that when I'm sending this Charlotte to my friend, I'm going to write a little letter inside and then put into this bag. I don't think she's watching this episode, so let's keep it a secret. This bag is knitted in the flat for the whole part, and then sewed around the edges. And then I knit an I-cord. This is a 4-stitch I-cord, and then I sew this I-cord strap to the bag, and then I sew this little button, and then there you have it, a little messenger bag for Charlotte. I think the designing of this Charlotte's outfit, they really fit in with each other. And the last piece of Charlotte's outfit is this linen stitch coat, and this is so hard to make. This linen stitch, which creates this texture, I can show you. This very dense linen-like fabric. This is the first time that I learned how to do this stitch. And for those who don't know, I have a mini lesson on that with Japanese symbols. This is the Japanese symbol chart for doing a linen stitch. It is only a 2-stitch by 2-row repeat, so I will explain right now. Don't be scared by the symbols. So for doing linen stitch, after you cast on, let's just say you are knitting in the round, so you will always be treating the right side, just to be easy. And on the first row, you will be knit one stitch and this big V with the horizontal line, and this just means you're slipping one stitch in the front. So then you repeat, you knit one stitch and you slip and then you slip the next stitch with yarn in the front. So in one row you knit and slip one with yarn in front and knit and slip one stitch with yarn in front and keep repeating. And then now on the next row, what you will do, you will be slipping the first stitch with yarn in front and knitting the second stitch. So basically, previously on the stitch where you have knitted, now you slip that stitch with yarn in front. And previously on the last row, if you slipped that stitch with yarn in front, and now you're gonna knit that one stitch. So basically in each row, half of the stitches you slip them with yarn in front like this, you are not knitting them. And on the second row, you are slipping the other half of the stitches with yarn in front that you are not knitting, and then you are knitting the other half of the stitches. So basically, knitting 2 rows in the linen stitch equals to just regular knitting 1 row, because in the linen stitch, you are always slipping half of the stitches. And that's why it's very time consuming to do this linen stitch. So I was just talking about the method of knitting in the round. If you are knitting in the flat, then you will be doing the reverse thing. So if you are knitting in the flat, you will be coming from this, working on the right side, and you are still knitting and slipping one stitch with yarn in front, knitting and slip one stitch with yarn in front. And now you are coming from the wrong side. And now if you want your right side to look like this, then on the wrong side you should be purling this stitch and then slip with a yarn in the back, and then purling and then slip with yarn in the back, so that on the right side you will look like this. So in Japanese knitting patterns, they always just plot everything in the right side, and you sort of have to figure out in your head, if you are doing the wrong side, what you have to do. So I haven't done a lot of the Japanese knitting mini lessons because I feel I can just sprinkle some of the Japanese knitting content into my regular knitting podcast, and I think that might be more helpful, so that you can see how I apply some of the Japanese knitting methodology into my knitting, so to make my understanding of some of the stitches easier. So here you got it, that is the linen stitch. And just to see a result of the linen stitch, you can always see some like horizontal bars in this linen stitch, and those are created by the slipping one stitch in the front. And you can see those little bars appear like in alternate rows. That's because you are slipping those stitches at every other stitches, every other rows. That's how you create the linen stitch. And this is a thicker fabric because you are basically knitting 2 rows to create the result of 1 row. And in the original pattern, the coat is this long, almost as long as the dress. And I got lazy, and also I don't want the coat to be too long so that it covers the whole dress. I still want to show off the dress, so I decided to make a cropped version of this coat, and so that I can finish knitting this coat within 1 week and be able to show you by the end of this weekend. So yeah, so I did a shorter version of the linen stitch coat, and also I sort of find my gauge of the linen stitch isn't very stable. So this is also a raglan construction. You can see the raglan lines along here and in the front along here. So all these body part is knitted in the flat, and the only part that's knitted in the round is for the sleeves. And I find that my gauge for knitting in the round is much denser than my gauge when I'm knitting in the flat. You can see for the sleeves I have a much denser linen stitch, whereas this back panel is more relaxed. I think the author probably had a denser gauge than mine, and while I'm knitting I found that this coat is super big, so I reduced, so I didn't do some of the increasing. So in the original pattern they were still increasing even after you have knitted it up to here. And also for the sleeve I did not do as many rounds. I think I did probably like 12 rounds fewer than the pattern, because I always like try it on after I knit a few rounds just to see how the fit goes, and I think this is just long enough for Charlotte so that she can still be showing off her little hands. Yeah, so I stopped prematurely for both the sleeves and the body. For this linen stitch, you cast on along this line, and then you do top down, and then after you knit to the raglan, you are leaving these stitches on waist yarn for the sleeves, and then you keep knitting in the flat for the bottom. And then here it has a little vent for the back, and that is created by knitting the left half and the right half separately. And at here, like for this part, I picked up 3 stitches along this line while knitting for this part, just so that it has like an overlapping vent, and this vent corresponds to the tail for Charlotte, and so that her tail can go out, can poke out like this. And then I knitted the sleeves, and then I pick up the stitches around the cast on line and knitted the collar. For the collar, the right side and the wrong side is different than the body, just so that you can fold the collar and still have the linen stitch side showing out. And then you knit some little parts. So you knit a small square for the 2 pockets, and then use mattress stitch to sew the little pockets in place. And then you knit these 2 little tabs and then sew them, and then you sew these little buttons. I bought these cute little green buttons a while ago to fit into this, and I think it fit with this linen stitch coat very well. I just finished making this coat last night, and I haven't gotten time to block it yet. I don't know if block will improve this, because this is supposed to be a coat, and it should like hold its structure instead of being too soft. But from my previous experience, this is knitted with pure cotton yarn. It's Katona by Sheep Jace. I'll put all these details in the description below. And from my experience, if it's a pure cotton yarn, the effect of blocking is not very obvious. The result almost looks the same prior and post blocking. But anyway, I will wash and block it after I show you this. So now I'm letting Charlotte wear all these clothing and model for you. Okay, look at her, how cute she is. I almost don't want to send her to my friend because I love her so much already. And there's another thing about Charlotte is with this tail, she can just sit on a table without like anything support her back, compared to like Tilly had to sit with some support on the back. But for Charlotte, with this support of the tail, she can sit by herself like this. And in the book, there is a character description for each of these animals. And for Charlotte, it says, "What a smart fox Charlotte is, in every sense. Her pretty dress and linen coat are the perfect ensemble for a trip to the city. She's off to the Science Museum with her packed lunch in her satchel." So there should be some lunch there. And I do think Charlotte has a smart look compared to the other animals, which has a more relaxed look, or a more, I don't know, like neighbor girl kind of vibe. And that's about Charlotte. And while I was making Charlotte, I also looked a lot of doll making designers in Ravelry, and there are some on my wish list that I'd like to just briefly talk about in case you're interested in making some of these animals but aren't ready to make this is like a 40 or 50 centimeter animal like this, and a lot of doll designs in Ravelry, they are smaller, like maybe 20 centimeters long, and I like to quickly go through my wish list so that I can give you some recommendations. I have 5 recommendations. My number 5 is designs by Claire Garland, and she designs very realistic animals. And I think a couple of days ago, one of her design, the frog, was very popular. It's just perhaps this big, and I've seen Rachel from the Night Sky Knitting making one of the frog, and it's more like a stash busting project. It doesn't use a lot of yarn, it's just some scrape of the green yarn, some scrape of the white yarn, and voila, you can make a small cute little frog. And you can also make sweaters for that frog as well. And the designer also has some other realistic designs like for dogs and penguins. So if you are interested in more realistic kind of animal dolls, you can look up for Claire Garland's design. I'll put all the links in below. And number 4 is Cynthia Valley, and she has some designs for bunny. She had a design called Bunny Odile, and there's I think Lion Winston or something. And the feature of her design is that her animal all look like this. and also I think in her patterns she always used knit in the round technique, so that you just knit those animals together without all the sewing, and you knit everything at once. You don't need to sew the parts separately together. You will just like knit the head, knit the body, and then knit the leg and the arm, that sort of thing, just based on the description. And I've seen some other people's project making those. So if you're not a fan of sewing and you are more of a fan of knitting in the round, even for smaller circumference, and then you can check out her pattern. And her animals are also small, like maybe this size, so that will require less knitting compared to Charlotte. And then my number 3 doll designer recommendation is Susan Hickson, also known as Mary Jane's Tea Room. And her design is mostly on bears. She has little tea room bears. Those bears are very cute. I'll put pictures here, and it's very huggable. And she provides 2 methods for knitting the same bear: the knitting in the round, or the knitting in the flat knit sewing, like what I did for Charlotte. And I think that's very good. That's very versatile. I would prefer knitting in the round because that's just one step fewer than knitting in the flat knit sewing. I don't mind the purling, but knitting in the round is faster, and also it saves the time for the sewing. So yeah. So if you like bear knitting, you can check out Mary Jane's Tea Room. And my number 2 on the wish list is designs by Julie Williams. And she has some design on bunny, fox, and deer. And her animals are also smaller and with shorter legs and shorter arms. And she also designed cute outfits for these animals. I think aesthetically I would consider those like smaller, shorter leg animals to be cuter. And I really want to knit the deer. And the deer pattern is a supplement of her fox pattern. So if you buy her fox doll pattern, and then you can download the deer pattern for free, which contains the modifications that you need to make on the fox pattern to change that fox into a deer. And I really like that deer design. I think it fits the Christmas mood very well. If I have enough yarn and time, then I would definitely want to knit the deer from Julie Williams designs. And my number 1 on the wish list is the Lulu the Little Bunny by Ekaterina Popova. I think this designer hasn't released a lot of doll patterns, and I really only just want to knit this Lulu Little Bunny. And this bunny is has a very different look than the other bunnies. She has like a dropped ear, and she has a little hairband and a small dress, and it seems like this is very small, like 20 centimeter ish or even smaller. And the bunny just has the cutest facial expression, and it doesn't seem to be a complicated knit. And this bunny looks like one of my friends, so I would definitely want to knit that bunny for her. So let me know if any of the dolls on the wish list is on your wish list right now, and maybe we can do a knit along for the next animal dolls at some point. So that's all for my finished objects or finished creature. And now let's move on to whips. I have 2 whips to show, one of which I haven't showed on this podcast, but I showed on my Instagram. This is a project bag, or it's just a little bag. Because a couple weeks ago, I have been knitting a lot of socks. I've been knitting a lot of summer knits, and also Charlotte. These are all in fingering weights with like 2mm, 3mm needles, and I just feel like my finger need a break from these smaller size needles, and I wanted to do some DK weight project. And in the meantime, I found that for summer I always just like wear these kind of t-shirts, and I don't have the pocket from a jacket to put in my wallet, and I just want to have a small bag that I can put my wallet, and also maybe like put a sock project in. And also I've talked previously in the channel before that I received a lot of stash yarn from my grandma when she learned that I'm knitting, and those yarn, there are a lot of colors in her stash yarn. Yeah, but none of them are enough for like a garment quality, like a sweater quality. Like they are usually just 1 or 2 balls like these, and there are different ways like fingering and some of the DK weight. No, this is not from my grandma. This is from my grandma. That is from my grandma. That is from my grandma. And I just think I can combine 2 of the fingering weights, knit 2 strands together and form a DK weight. And then I just want to knit like a stash busting kind of project. And I also have some yarn that from my previous sweater projects, just like 7 grams or 3 grams of them that I don't know what to do. And so I think maybe I can just stripe them or combine them together to make a little bag. and I didn't follow any pattern. I think a lot of bag pattern are made with crochet, and I'm not very good at crochet. I bought the full set of crochet hooks and a book on crochet. I learned the basic like double crochet, single crochet, crochet chain. I learned those stitches, but I didn't have enough time to practice, so I go back to my comfort zone, which is just knitting, and just knit this bag of my own creation. So maybe this will turn into a pattern, I don't know. It's not a super difficult construction. So I start by knitting a bottom panel. You can see this rectangle here. So I knit in the flat for a rectangle, and then I pick up stitches around the rectangle, and then I just keep knitting in the round. And while knitting in the round, I keep changing my color of yarn. It's usually just I just finished using one of my scrape yarn, and then I get the next ball of scrape yarn. You can probably see this yarn from my previous project. If you remember, in episode 1 I showed my cat sweater, and this color is a scrape yarn from making my cat sweater. And what other thing? And these yellow, red, greenish yarn comes from the scrape yarn from making the fox fingerless glove for my friend. And this purple, not sure if you can see, this purple shade is from my purple cardigan number 8. So I just used a lot of random scrape yarn, either from my grandma stash or from my own of making sweaters. And also I try to combine some contrasting color. Like here you can see I used one strand of yellow and one strand of red, and then here I use one strand of yellow and one strand of green, just to make it more interesting, and it gives it a more like upcycled feel. Yeah, I decided to call this bag Upcycled Project Bag, and my husband suggested that name to me. Like the other day I was thinking what I should name this. I had like Stash Busting Project Bag, I had Scrapey Project Bag, but I couldn't find the right word, and my husband said, what about upcycled? And I told him, you are really a worm in my stomach because that's exactly the word I was looking for that I had forgotten, and that's upcycled. And I knit to here of enough height, and then I cast off 5 stitches along each side, and this will be where I attach the straps, which I haven't knitted the straps yet. And then for the edge, you can see I did a picot edge, which is the same technique that I learned for Charlotte's dress. And this will be where I put in the what you call it, the cord for this kind of bucket bag. So now I'm just putting some waste yarn here, but in the future when I have time I will knit some I-cord for this bucket bag cord. But I didn't have time to work on this because last week it was all on Charlotte the Fox. That's for the bag. Another whip you have seen, and this is the Drone Top Light by Petite Knit, and I have made a huge modification on it. So the original design is just a plain tank top, and I decided to put in the straps as well as this lacy pattern. The lacy pattern comes from the Japanese lacy pattern 280. I have the Chinese version, but the English is available in the link from below. And it is knitted bottom up, so I'm still in the knitting in the round part, but I think soon, after a couple more straps, I will be doing the shaping for the shoulder and the strap. And now I just finished half of the I-cord. I used the contrasting color for the I-cord. It's rolling a little bit. You can see I used this navy blue for the I-cord bind off. But I think it's rolling a little bit, but maybe it will like flatten out after I block it. I don't know. And I'm not sure about the lacy pattern. I'm not sure if I like the lacy pattern. It took me some effort to do. It's not a hard lacy pattern, but I don't know if it's necessary. In Chinese, there is a phrase called 画蛇添足, which literally translates to you're drawing a snake and then you draw feet for the snake, like meaning that you are putting some extra unnecessary things into your work. And I'm thinking if I am just drawing the feet for the snakes by doing these lacy patterns, because I think like stripes themselves look good already, and adding these lacy pattern just might be too much. I don't know. Anyways, I think after these I won't do this lacy pattern anymore, because that will be around the like chest area, and I don't want any more holes around the chest area. I think it's okay to have these holes around the waist, but yeah, I think from the chest above I would just want a solid piece of fabric, and it will also make my knitting a bit faster. Let's see if these will turn into an FO next time. So that's all the projects I want to show you. Since we are at episode 10 now, turning 2 digits, and also there have been a lot of new viewers joining the channel, and I'm thinking it might be good to do a Q&A session. I have set up asking me anonymous question link. I've posted on the community tab as well on my Instagram stories, and I'll put that link in below in case you still have new questions for me. It can be knitting related or personal related, anything you're interested in knowing about me or knitting that I can help. And I posted the link yesterday, or yeah, I posted the link yesterday, so maybe some of you haven't gotten the time to check it out. I've collected a couple questions, and I'll be answering one of the questions today, and I will be answering the rest of the new coming questions in my future episodes. And the question I got was, what is your dream knit? What are some of the projects that you want to make one day? And for that, I have 2 answers. Number 1 is a Marie Wallen design called the Bramble, and this is my favorite Marie Wallen design, featuring a spiky kind of motif. This motif just stands out among other designs by Marie Wallen somehow. For me, I always have this like romantic kind of imagination for Bramble, maybe from childhood when I was into fairy tales by, Hans Andersen. Like there's always something about the female main character got trapped by magic and had to do something with Bramble, or they had to cross some Bramble woods, or they had to dance on like spiky Bramble forest or something. I don't remember. I just had this weird thing about spiky. It gave me a very powerful, full of life energy kind of feeling. And also last year I got this book. This is The Lost Words. It's an illustration book. I saw this from the Gentle Knitter Knitting podcast, and there was one episode where she showed this book, and it features a lot of words that got erased from the Oxford Junior Dictionary because they weren't found to be useful for this modern age anymore, but they are like important aspects from nature. And one of the words in this book that got illustrated and written is bramble. For each word, the author also wrote a poem alongside the illustration, and the poem for bramble is one of my favorites. How about I read it now? Because this bramble poem depicts an image where this whole civilization had been taken by the powerful growing bramble that's like growing out of control, and I just really like the imagination that grows from this image. Let me read it for you. Bramble is on the march again, rolling and arching along the hedges, into parks on the city edges. All streets are suddenly thick with briar. Cars snarled fast, business over. Moths have come in their millions, drawn to the thorns. Their air flutters. Bramble has reached each house now, looped it in wire. People lock doors, close shutters. Little shoots steal through keyholes to live in quiet halls. Empty stairwells, bowls of bright blackberries where the light falls. I just really like the image that's conjured by this poem. So yeah, I want to knit the Murray Wallen Bramble sweater design back to knitting. I'm still building the confidence for knitting Farrell. I think I'll have enough confidence after I have finished knitting my Farrell vest with all the sticking. That project is hibernating because it's too hot here in the summer, and I'll be doing some summer projects. But after I finish this June top and socks thing, I'll go back to the vest knitting that I talked about in episode 7. I'll put a link up above if you're interested in checking out that Farrell vest. And also when I have the budget to buy Murray Wallen's kit. My number 2 dream knit is some sweater of my own design with this yarn from Sandnes Garn. This is Double Sunday by Sandnes Garn. The colorway is Statement Green, and this is a merino yarn. I am just so inspired by this color. If you've been following me along, you know I'm a sucker for green and purple. And this green is just so... I am out of words. It's statement green, so it shows a statement. It shows my statement for my love for the color green. And I've only started designing since March or something, and I'm slowly building confidence to design more complicated pieces. I've designed some socks, I've knitted some sweaters, and I even bought some book for sweater design. And for this, I'm thinking of some plant themed design, maybe about willow. There's a lot of willow back in my hometown, just like below my home when I was in China. And there aren't a lot of willow here. So I do like the slender dancing wavy kind of feature of the willow tree. So I'm thinking designing some sweater with willow theme. I'm specifically thinking a raglan sweater with like the raglan line extends even down below, and along the raglan line it will be some lacy pattern or some cable pattern that resembles the willow tree twigs. I don't know, it's still in the brewing, and I think at some point after I finish all these whips at hand and I'll be working on this sweater maybe in the autumn, and it will be my first design of a sweater, and we'll see how that goes. So that comes to the end of this episode. So if you enjoyed what I talked about, please like, comment, and if you haven't, please consider subscribing so that you will be notified when I make newer episodes. And if some of the tips and tricks were useful to you, please consider tipping me on Ko-fi. You can buy me a Ko-fi on ko-fi.com/Seedling Stitch. And I'm also on Instagram as SD_Athena, or if you search for Seedling Stitch, you can find me. I'm on Ravelry as Athena Liu or Seedling Stitch Designs. You can see the patterns that I've published there. And in the end of this episode, I'm going to play a song called My Friend the Forest by Nils Frahm from this sheet book. And Nils Frahm is a contemporary German composer, and she does some piano music as well as electronic music, and she is one of my favorite musicians. And I just think the song of this name, My Friend the Forest, fits well with my animal friends, with this green with this green linen coat, and my other friends that might be living in the forest. Hope you enjoy. See you next time. Bye. Happy knitting.